The day began without any public sign that it would end differently from the many campus events that had come before it. Charlie Kirk started the morning following a pre-planned schedule tied to a stop on his national tour. The event at Utah Valley University had been announced in advance, tickets had been distributed, and logistical coordination was already in motion. Travel arrangements were routine. There were no reported delays, no last-minute cancellations, and no public alerts connected to security concerns that morning. Internally, the focus remained on timing, arrival windows, stage setup, and the order of events once the program began. Everything followed a structure that had been used at previous stops. Online, discussion around the event was already active. Supporters shared posts confirming attendance, while critics circulated messages objecting to the appearance. None of this was unusual for a campus appearance tied to a politically charged figure, and nothing suggested an immediate threat based on publicly available information at that time. By late morning, preparations at the university were underway. Equipment was being positioned, staff were moving into assigned roles, and attendees continued to gather. The day was unfolding according to plan, with no indication, either on the ground or in official reporting, that the next several hours would mark a turning point. As midday approached, activity around the Utah Valley University campus increased. The event space was secured for public access, with designated entry points guiding attendees toward the venue. Campus officials and local law enforcement were present, managing movement and monitoring the growing crowd as people continued to arrive. Security checks were visible, but standard for an open campus event. Officers positioned themselves near walkways, while event staff coordinated with campus personnel to keep access routes clear. There were no public announcements indicating elevated risk, and no official statements suggested that the event was being treated differently from other large gatherings held at the university. Outside the venue, small groups gathered early, some holding phones to record arrivals, others engaging in discussions sparked by the speaker's presence on campus. These scenes were quickly shared online, adding to the digital conversation already surrounding the event. Despite the mixed reactions, the atmosphere on the ground remained controlled. Behind the scenes, final walkthroughs were completed. Stage positioning, microphone checks, and crowd flow were reviewed one last time. From the outside, the event appeared fully prepared to proceed as scheduled, with operations moving forward in an orderly and predictable manner. As the crowd continued to form on campus, the online conversation began shifting in tone. Short videos and photos from outside the venue started circulating across social media platforms, showing the size of the gathering and the proximity of the stage to public walkways. Within hours, posts related to the event were being shared far beyond the university. Some accounts amplified past statements made by Charlie Kirk, framing the appearance as controversial, while others promoted the event as a show of support. Hashtags connected to his name and the university began trending regionally. None of the posts referenced any immediate incident, but the volume of attention around the event increased noticeably. Live streams were announced by attendees planning to record the speech. At the same time, criticism and counter-commentary intensified online, creating a sharply divided digital response that continued to grow as the start time approached. This escalation remained confined to screens and feeds, with no verified reports at that moment of disruptions affecting the event itself. On the ground, preparations moved forward uninterrupted, while online, the event was already becoming one of the most discussed campus appearances of the day. Shortly before the program was set to begin, Charlie Kirk spent time with members of his team in a restricted area near the venue. Final coordination focused on timing, crowd positioning, and how long the appearance would last. There were no public-facing changes to the schedule, and no statements were issued suggesting adjustments due to safety concerns. Conversations during this period remained practical. Staff confirmed cues for when he would step onto the stage and reviewed the sequence of audience interaction planned for the event. Phones were checked for updates, but no official alerts or warnings were received that altered the plan. Nearby, security personnel continued monitoring entrances and open spaces surrounding the venue. Their presence remained consistent with earlier observations, and movement around the site stayed orderly. Attendees continued filtering in, unaware of any internal discussions taking place. As the start time drew closer, Kirk prepared to move from the staging area toward the crowd. The transition from preparation to public appearance happened without interruption, and the event advanced exactly as scheduled. When Charlie Kirk entered the public view near the stage area, the crowd's attention shifted immediately. Phones were raised, and attendees began recording as he moved toward the speaking position. The environment was open air, with people gathered on multiple sides, leaving little separation between the stage and the audience. Event staff guided movement near the front while maintaining the planned layout. There were no barriers added at this stage, and no announcements were made to alter crowd behavior. The atmosphere reflected a typical campus appearance, with a mix of applause, vocal reactions, and constant filming. Kirk acknowledged the crowd as he reached the stage area, briefly engaging with people positioned closest to him. The setting remained informal, and the event continued without delay. From the outside, there was no visible disruption or indication that conditions had changed since earlier preparations. As the microphones were made ready and attention focused forward, the transition into the main portion of the program began naturally, drawing the audience into the moment. Once the audio was live, Charlie Kirk began speaking without delay. His opening remarks followed the structure used at previous stops on the tour, addressing the audience directly and setting the context for the discussion ahead. The crowd remained engaged, with reactions coming in real time as he spoke. Cameras and phones continued recording from multiple angles. Portions of the speech were streamed live, while short clips were posted almost immediately across social platforms. The setting remained calm, and there were no interruptions during the early part of the talk. Kirk moved through his points at a steady pace, occasionally responding to visible reactions from the audience. The proximity between the speaker and attendees remained unchanged, and security positions stayed consistent around the perimeter. As the speech progressed, attention stayed fixed on the stage, with no indication from official sources or eyewitness accounts that anything out of the ordinary was developing at that moment. As the speech continued, the format shifted toward audience interaction. A question was taken from within the crowd, and Charlie Kirk responded directly, addressing the topic without breaking the pace of the event. This exchange was captured clearly on multiple recordings, later becoming one of the most widely shared moments from the appearance. The response unfolded in a conversational manner, consistent with earlier campus events. There was no visible escalation in tone, and the surrounding crowd remained focused on the exchange. Phones stayed raised, documenting both the question and the reply in real time. From the stage, visibility across the open area remained unobstructed. Attendees stood close together, and no movement suggested a disruption or security concern. The event appeared to be proceeding normally, with attention centered entirely on the speaker. The exchange concluded without interruption, and the focus returned to the stage as the moment passed, marking the last uninterrupted segment of the program. According to multiple eyewitness videos and later media reports, the moment shifted abruptly. A loud gunshot was heard near the venue, cutting through the ongoing program. The sound caused immediate confusion, followed by visible panic among those closest to the stage. Recordings captured people reacting instinctively, some dropping to the ground, others turning and running away from the open area. The speech stopped instantly. Attention moved away from the stage as attendees attempted to understand what had happened and where the sound had come from. In the seconds that followed, individuals near Charlie Kirk moved toward him as others cleared space. Shouting and movement filled the area, replacing what moments earlier had been a controlled public event. Phones continued recording, capturing fragments of the chaos as it unfolded. Law enforcement and security personnel began responding within moments, as the scene transitioned from a public appearance into an active emergency situation. As people moved away from the open area, those closest to Charlie Kirk focused on getting him off the stage space. Witnesses later described seeing him being supported and carried away from the immediate scene, while others continued to seek cover. The priority shifted quickly from evacuation to emergency assistance. Emergency calls were placed almost immediately. Within minutes, first responders were alerted, and campus officials began coordinating with local law enforcement. The surrounding area was partially cleared as officers moved in to secure the location and assess the situation. Videos shared afterward showed a heavy police presence arriving on campus, with officers directing people away from the venue. Sirens became audible as emergency vehicles approached, signaling a rapid escalation in response. At this point, the campus atmosphere had fully changed. What began as a scheduled public event had turned into an active law enforcement situation, with attention now centered on medical response and securing the area. Charlie Kirk was transported away from the campus under emergency conditions. Reports later confirmed that he was taken to a nearby hospital while responders continued working at the scene. Medical personnel focused on stabilizing him during transit as law enforcement maintained control of the surrounding area. At the university, officers expanded the security perimeter. Buildings nearby were placed under restrictions, and movement on campus was limited as authorities began a coordinated response. Students and attendees were directed to leave the area or remain sheltered, depending on their location. Information during this period remained limited and fragmented. Officials did not immediately release details about the severity of the injuries, and early updates were confined to confirming that an active investigation was underway. News outlets began reporting the incident as a shooting at a public event, citing law enforcement sources. As the situation developed, the focus split between medical efforts off-site and investigative actions continuing on campus, marking the transition from emergency response to a broader security operation. At the hospital, medical teams worked under emergency protocols. During this period, officials maintained tight control over information, releasing only minimal statements confirming that the injured individual was receiving treatment. No public briefing detailed the condition, and updates were limited to acknowledging an ongoing medical response. As hours passed, coordination shifted from immediate care to formal notification procedures. Hospital officials and law enforcement aligned on the next steps, while family members and senior representatives were informed privately before any public announcement was made. Later that day, authorities confirmed that Charlie Kirk had died as a result of his injuries. The confirmation came through official channels, marking the point at which the incident moved from a critical injury case to a fatal shooting under active investigation. With the confirmation issued, the focus expanded beyond the hospital, setting the stage for national reporting, official statements, and the next phase of the response. Following the official confirmation of death, law enforcement agencies moved quickly to formalize the investigation. Statements were released identifying the incident as a targeted shooting, and responsibility for the case was transferred to joint local and federal authorities. The campus remained secured as evidence collection continued. Investigators began reviewing available footage, including videos recorded by attendees and surveillance systems in the surrounding area. Witnesses were asked to provide accounts, and law enforcement issued requests for any additional recordings that could assist in reconstructing the sequence of events. At the same time, official communication shifted toward public safety and transparency. Authorities emphasized that there was no ongoing threat to the campus, while confirming that the search for those responsible was active. Information was released carefully, focusing on confirmed facts rather than speculation. As the investigation entered this phase, the incident moved fully into the national spotlight, with attention turning from what had happened to how it would be examined and explained. As investigators continued their work, information about the suspected shooter began to emerge through official updates. Law enforcement confirmed that a suspect had been identified and taken into custody, while stressing that the process was ongoing and subject to legal review. Specific details were limited, reflecting the early stage of the case. Search warrants and evidence analysis followed, with authorities focusing on reconstructing the shooter's movements before and after the incident. Public briefings emphasized procedure, charges, court timelines, and jurisdiction, rather than motive, which officials stated would be addressed once verified. During this period, social media activity intensified again, this time reacting to the arrest and early investigative findings. Some posts shared confirmed updates, while others circulated unverified claims that were not supported by official statements. Law enforcement repeatedly urged the public to rely on released information rather than speculation. By the end of the day, the case had shifted from an active emergency to a structured criminal investigation, setting the framework for legal proceedings and continued public scrutiny. As verified details stabilized, national media coverage expanded rapidly. Major outlets published timelines built from official statements, eyewitness footage, and law enforcement briefings. The focus moved toward the broader implications of the shooting rather than the unfolding investigation alone. Public figures across the political spectrum issued statements condemning the violence. These responses were shared widely on social platforms, often alongside clips from the event and earlier moments from the tour. Platforms began moderating content tied to the incident, removing posts that promoted violence while allowing news-related material to remain accessible. The conversation online became increasingly polarized. While many posts centered on grief and condemnation, others used the incident to advance political narratives. Verified updates were frequently reposted to counter misinformation as journalists and officials emphasized accuracy. By this stage, the event was no longer confined to the campus or the investigation. It had become part of a national discussion on political violence, public safety, and the risks surrounding high-profile appearances, shaping how the final hours of the previous day were being understood. By the time the 24-hour window closed, the immediate facts of the case were largely established. The shooting had been confirmed as fatal, the suspect was in custody, and the investigation had entered its formal phase. What began as a scheduled campus appearance had ended as a nationally documented act of political violence. News coverage shifted toward analysis, examining security practices at public events and the speed at which online reactions can shape public understanding. Universities, law enforcement agencies, and event organizers referenced the incident while reviewing protocols for future appearances involving high-profile figures. The digital record of the day, videos, posts, and official statements remained online, forming a permanent timeline that could be reviewed frame by frame. Each element reflected a different moment from the same sequence of hours, now tied together by confirmed reporting. As the day concluded, the focus moved forward rather than backward. The final 24 hours were no longer unfolding in real time, but had become a documented record, one defined not by speculation, but by verified events that reshaped the conversation around public safety and political expression.